Right, let's get talking. Akon, the perfect musical storm. All right, so this is an article from Vibe.com. It says Van Lathan calls out Akon for shitting on the African American experience. First off, Akon has been on his clown shit for years now, Van Lathan says. So we see Van Lathan and we see Akon. Van Lathan is displeased by Akon's sentiments that Africans are better performers than Black Americans. On Tuesday, December 27th, the former TMZ co host and senior producer took to Instagram to unload on the convicted musician and his quote, unquote, clown shit that Lathan claims he's engaged in for quote, unquote, for years now. First off, Akon has been on his clown shit for years now, but that's another topic, Van expressed. God bless him. I want to say something though. I'm black, like black American black, like South Louisiana Bayou Bonnage black. Keep that in mind, South Louisiana. He asserts his pride in Black American culture and pushes back on the idea that it's less than African culture. Now, notice that there is a contrast being placed here between Black and African, interestingly enough. Lathan then analyzed the intention behind the opinionated artist's comments, accusing him of shitting on an entire experience I feel connected to by birthright. Let's see if it goes any further than that. Okay, so now we're going to look at a historic document. It's written by George Washington Cable. George Washington Cable was born in New Orleans, Louisiana in 1844. Though very young when the Civil War began, he served in the 4th Mississippi Cavalry. George Washington Cable. After the war, he was for some time a surveyor and then a clerk in a cotton factor's office. He gave up this position to become a reporter on the New Orleans Picayune, for which he had been writing sketches. Reporting, however, was not his taste, and finding that the stories he had time to write between his newspaper duties accept were acceptable to Scribner's magazine and other periodicals, he decided in 1879 to devote himself to literature as a profession. In 1886, he moved to Northampton, Massachusetts, where he still resides. Of course, he's dead now, long dead now. But while engaged in newspaper work, he began to write sketches of New Orleans life. These he later gathered into his book, Old Creole Days, published in 1879. Since then, he has written several novels and collections of short stories, nearly all of which have his distinctive background of Louisiana Creole life. Becoming interested in philanthropic enterprises, he has given much time and energy to the promotion of societies for social betterment, such as the Home Culture Clubs, founded in 1887, and now the Northampton's People's Institute. In addition to the writing of books, he has lectured on literary and philanthropic subjects and has given readings from his own stories. So this, because it's written as present tense, this is an old document, and it says novelist and story writers. When was this written? Anyways, trying to see when it was written, but anyways, okay. Going on down. The dancing place Congo. Congo Square. Whoever has been to New Orleans with eyes not totally abandoned to buying and selling will of course remember St. Louis Cathedral, looking southeastward riverward across quaint Jackson Square and the old Place d'Armes And if he has any feeling for flowers, he has not forgotten the little garden behind the cathedral, so antique and unexpected, named for the beloved old priest Pierre Antoine. The old Rue Royale lies across the sleeping garden's foot on the street's farther side. Another street less away at right angles, northward straight and imperceptibly downward from the cathedral and garden toward the rear of the city. It is lined mostly with humble ground floor and garret houses of stucco brick, their wooden doorsteps on the brick sidewalks. This is Orleans Street, so named when the city was founded. Now I'm going to skip ahead to get to the most interesting thing he says. Going down. Notice that okay, so it says Grand Orchestra. We're at 2. It says the booming of African drums and blast of huge wooden horns called to the gathering. It was these notes of invitation reaching beyond those of other outlandish instruments that caught the Ethiopian ear. But put alacrity into the dark foot and brought their owners, male and female, trooping from all quarters. The drums were very long, hollowed often from a single piece of wood, open at one end and having a sheep or goat skin stretched across the other. One was large, the other much smaller. The tight skin heads were not held up to be struck. The drums were laid along on the turf, and the drummers bestrode them and beat them on the head madly with fingers, fists, and feet, with slow vehemence on the great drum, and fiercely and rapidly on the small one. Sometimes an extra performer sat on the ground behind the larger drum at its open end and beat upon the wooden sides of it with 2 sticks. The smaller drum was often made from a joint or 2 of very large bamboo, in the West Indies where such could be got, and this is said to be the origin of its name, for so it was called the bambula. In stolen hours at night, or the basking hour of noon, the black man contrived to fashion these rude instruments and others. The drummers, I say, bestrode the drums. The other musicians sat about them in an arc, cross-legged on the ground. One important instrument was a gourd, partly filled with pebbles or grains of corn, flourished violently at the end of a stout staff with one hand and beaten upon the palm of the other. Other performers rang triangles, and others twanged from Jews' harps an astonishing amount of sound. Another instrument was the jawbone of some ox, horse, or mule, and a key rattled rhythmically along its weather-beaten teeth. At times, the drums were reinforced by one or more empty barrels or casks beaten on the head with the shank bones of cattle. And it goes on down. Things we don't have reason to care about. But the grand instrument, at last, the first violin, as one might say, was the banjo. It had but 4 strings, not 6. Of the dictionary, it is not the favorite musical instrument of the Negroes of the southern states of America. Uncle Remus, it is not the favorite musical instrument of the Negroes of the southern states of America, Uncle Remus says, so truly that is the fiddle. But for the true African dance, a dance not so much of legs and feet as of the upper body, a dance not so much of legs and feet as of the upper half of the body, a sensual, devilish thing tolerated only by Latin American masters. There was wanted the dark inspiration of African drums and the banjos, thump and strum. Going down. Some stuff in French. More stuff in French. And it says here, and yet there was entertaining variety, where in the dance there was constant exhilarating novelty, endless invention, and the turning, bowing, arm swinging, posturing, and leaping of the dancers. Moreover, the music of Congo Plains was not tamed to mere monotone. Monotone became subordinate to many striking qualities. Its strain was wild. Its contact with French tastes gave it often great tenderness of sentiment. It grew in fervor and rose and sank and rose again with the play of emotion in the singers and dancers. Going on down. The Gathering, part 3 of this document. It was a weird one. The Negro of colonial Louisiana was a most grotesque figure. He was nearly naked. Often his neck and arms, thighs, shanks, and splay feet were shrunken, tough sinewy, like a monkey's. Sometimes it was scant diet and cruel labor that had made them so. Even the requirement of law was only that he should have not less than a barrel of corn, nothing else, a month, nor get more than 30 lashes to the 24 hours. The whole world was crueler those times than now. We must not judge them by our own. Often the slave's attire was only a cotton shirt or a pair of pantaloons hanging in indecent tatters to his naked waist. The bondwoman was well clad, who had on as much as a coarse chemise and petticoat. To add a tignon, a madras handkerchief twisted into a turban was high gentility, and the number of kerchiefs beyond that one was the measure of absolute wealth. Some were rich in tignons, especially those who served within the house, and pleased the mistress or even the master. There were Hagars in those days. However, Congo Plains did not gather the house servants so much as the field hands. So they're saying that people from the Congo were more so put out into the fields. These came in troops. See them wilder than gypsies, wilder than the Moors and Arabs whose strong blood and features one sees at a glance, and so many of them, gangs as they were called, gangs and gangs of them, and this and that in yonder direction. Tall, well-knit Senegalese. So you have Akon, who was Senegalese, from Cape Verde, black as ebony, with intelligent, kindly eyes and long, straight, shapely noses. Mandingos from the Gambia River, lighter of color, of cruder form, and a cunning that shows in the countenance, whose enslavement seems specially ashamed. Their nation, the merchants of Africa, dwelling in towns, industrious, thrifty, skilled in commerce and husbandry, and expert in the working of metals, even to silver and gold, and fulas, playfully miscalled poulars, fat chickens of goodly stature with the perceptible rose tint in the cheeks, and sosos, former famous warriors, dexterous with the African targe. I don't know what a targe is, some kind of weapon. And in contrast to these, with small ears, thick eyebrows, bright eyes, flat upturned noses, shining skin, wide mouths, and white teeth, the Negroes of Guinea, true and unmixed, from the Gold Coast, the Slave Coast, and Cape of Palms, not from the Grain Coast, the English had that trade. See them come, popos or papaws, cotocolis, fitas, socos, aguas, short copper-colored means. What havoc the slavers did make, and from interior of Africa, others equally proud and warlike, fierce Nagos and Fons, tawny Awasas, Igbos so light-colored that one could not tell them from mulattoes, but for the national tattooing, and the half-civilized and quick-witted but ferocious Arata, the original Vodou worshipper, and how many more? For here come also men and women from all the great Congo coast, Angola, Malimbe, Ambris, etc. Small, good-natured, sprightly boys and gay, as in happy gay, garrulous gals, thick-lipped but not tattooed, chaffering, singing, and guffawing as they come. These are they for whom the dance and the place are named. The most numerous sort of Negro in these colonies. the Congos and front Congos. And though serpent worshippers, yet the gentlest and kindliest natures that come from Africa. Such was the company among these Bosals, that is, native Africans. There was, of course, an ever growing number of Negroes who proudly called themselves Creole Negroes, that is, born in America. And at the present time, there is only here and there an old native African to be met with, vain of his singularity and trembling on his staff. Then they mention the Bambula again. And they mention another African group. They mention the somebody who is a Bambaras. So what we see here, they mention another African group, somebody called a Kiamba. See if they mention anything else. But anyways, you have that. And then we see mention of, we have this. So we have a African with an instrument called a kanting, and then we have a painting of an African American with a banjo. We can see clearly similarities in the two instruments. The banjo is considered an American adaptation of some African instrument. It's a painting by Henry Ossawa Taylor. Called The Banjo Lesson. And this is important because this man is senior to this boy. So this man, and perhaps this is an enslaved person, I don't know, could be. But this gentleman, by him being an elder, is closer in time to his African ancestors. So he's passing down African knowledge to what is probably his American born grandchild, or could be great grandchild, or however many generations. And I'm not saying that this man is necessarily from Africa. I'm just saying by him being older, he is chronologically closer to uh, both of their African ancestors than he is, the boy is, chronologically speaking. Okay, so now going back to Akon, for him to say that Africans are better performers than African Americans is confusing, considering that African American performance art is African in origin, or is derived from African culture, even though there are people who don't want to admit that. that is, or this is the case. Now we go into this blog about drumming. This is showing people gathered at Congo Square to dance and perform. This is this was a drum, an African style drum that was actually made in America. It says here in this article, drumming for peace, blogspot.com. Quest of the Western Empire Christian missionaries and slave owners tried to de-drum Africans, and the African diaspora, with the exception of the West Indies, South America, and in some places in the United States. For Christians, drums were instruments, and in some places in the United States. For Christians, drums were instruments of paganism, the devil, and sensuality. One writer on multicultural worship states that it is because of drums accentuated rhythm is because drums accentuated rhythm in worship that it was particularly targeted and criminalized by the colonial masters. In a recent study of world Christianity, scholar Lamine Sane critically describes the missionary effort to ban drums from African worship services. The West's Teutonic inhibitions about worship as an expressionless formal activity in which the body is propped up in a state just shy of rigor mortis contradicted every instinct and reflex in African life. A wet blanket cannot muffle a drum. Another reason drums were banned in some instances in early America was because the drum was understood to be an instrument of communication. Since drums could talk, they could be used to gather slaves together to plan rebellion. Slave owners sought to prevent African slaves from signaling for rebellion with their drums. In 1740, after the Stono Rebellion, the South Carolina Colonial Assembly outlawed hand drums. In a similar colonial context, as early as 1696, the legislature of Jamaica passed a law against gathering and drumming. The law was enacted to prevent resistance to the slave system. For the prevention of the meeting of slaves in great numbers on Sundays and holidays, whereby they have taken liberty to contrive and bring to pass many of their bloody and inhuman transactions, no master or mistress or overseer shall suffer any drumming or meeting of any slaves not belonging to their own plantations, to rendezvous, feast, revel, beat drum, or cause any disturbance. Even with these instances of the banning of drumming in colonial context, there is evidence that in some locations within early America, drumming was not forbidden because it was not viewed by whites as a threat or continued in spite of any type of ban. An African drum in the British Museum was acquired in Virginia. Above photo. As part of the Sloan bequest of 1753. The British believed it to be an Indian drum. It appears to be an Akon style drum made of American cedar and deerskin. In the 1930s, African Americans told government interviewer from the Works Progress Administration about using hand drums in their rituals. These may have openly played, maybe they meant to say they, but these may have openly played these drums, or they were made drums, or they were ready-made drums that could be disassembled quickly if need be. One place where we know African drumming continued unabated was at location considered the seedbed of jazz, gospel, blues, and rock. Congo Square in New Orleans. Benjamin Latrobe, known as the father of American architecture, who worked in New Orleans, gives an eyewitness account from February 21st, 1819, of encountering African American drummers playing on drums and other African instruments in Congo Square. An elderly man sits astride a large cylindrical drum, Using his fingers and the edge of his hand, he jabs repeatedly at the drumhead, which is around a foot in diameter and probably made from an animal's skin, evoking a throbbing pulsation with rapid, sharp strokes. A second drummer, holding his instrument between his knees, joins in, playing with the same staccato attack. A third black man, seated on the ground, plucks at a string instrument, the body of which is roughly fashioned from a calabash. Another calabash has been made into a drum, and a woman beats at it with two short sticks. One voice, then other voices join in. A dance of seeming contradictions accompanies this musical give and take, a moving hieroglyphic that appears on the one hand informal and spontaneous, yet on closer inspection, ritualized and precise. It is a dance of massive proportions. A dense crowd of dark bodies forms into circular groups, perhaps 500 or 600 individuals moving in time to the pulsation of the music. Some swaying gently, others aggressively stomping their feet. A number of women in the group began chanting. In other regions, early African American rhythm took on other forms such as the ring shout. Part 2, next blog. Okay, so could go into the ring shout, but now Akon has been accused, going back to Akon, of infiltrating Black American culture. The way he sings, or maybe what he sings, I don't know, is seen as him, I guess, trying to be, oddly enough, black and not African. Because sometimes there are times when black is contrasted with African, even in terms of phenotype. So Van Lathan, who is lighter skinned, though still has West African features, you have people who see this as what is typical or the norm for being black. And then you have people who see um, Akon as the norm for being African. However, we'll close this up. We're going to go, I'm going to type in Zimbio Don Cheadle and okay, so Don Cheadle and Chiwetel Ejiofor. Okay, so Don Cheadle is Black American. Chiwetel Ejiofor is Nigerian British, or maybe I should just say that he is British and has Nigerian parents. But clearly, if we're just going by skin color, then Don Cheadle is darker, significantly darker than Chiwetel Ejiofor. So we can't just make that contrast, but there's a tendency for people to want to do that. Anyways, so now just go to Akon again. So Akon is not perceived as necessarily singing like an African, because he does not sing in his home language. He doesn't sing in Wolof. He's Senegalese, and most Senegalese people speak a language called Wolof. He doesn't sing in